Hey there, welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into cults.
Ooh.
It's fascinating and maybe a little bit unnerving.
Right.
It sounds like you want to understand what exactly makes a group a cult and how to spot those red flags.
Yeah.
Especially when someone throws around accusations like, that's a cult.
Yeah.
So we're going to be using an article from Era Flight
Okay.
called Defining Cult Mentality to Uninformed Public as our guide for this.
I like it.
By the end of this, you'll have a much better grasp on the psychology behind cult dynamics.
Okay.
And how to identify those subtle signs of manipulation.
That's so important because it's interesting how the word cult itself triggers such strong reactions. People often picture these extreme scenarios.
Right.
But the reality is that cult-like behavior can be far more subtle and insidious.
Yeah.
You know, even showing up in everyday situations.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so important.
Yeah.
This article really emphasizes the role of fear. It argues that fear is often used as a tool to suppress spiritual knowledge.
Right.
And quickly dismiss groups that challenge the norm.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever experienced that kind of pushback when you've tried to explore new ideas or beliefs?
All the time.
Maybe even getting labeled as being in a cult?
Oh, yeah. It's a common reaction, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Humans are wired to fear the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone comes along challenging deeply held beliefs,
Right.
whether it's about religion or politics or even science, you know, it can trigger a very defensive response.
Right.
People might resort to labeling something as a cult just to like shut down the conversation and avoid confronting their own discomfort.
It's like that saying, when in doubt, shout cult.
Right. Exactly.
But jokes aside, the article makes a really compelling point about how this fear can be manipulated to discredit genuine spiritual seekers.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
The more something is labeled as a cult, the more people fear it. And that fear itself can be used to justify further control and isolation.
That's a great point. And it leads us to the core of what actually makes a group a cult.
Right.
This article highlights 6 key warning signs.
Okay.
And I think we're going to break down the most revealing ones.
Okay.
You know, the ones that really expose the underlying power dynamics and manipulation tactics.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
The first one that really jumped out at me was claims of exclusive truth.
Oh, yeah.
It's this idea that only this specific group has the answers. The one true path to salvation, enlightenment, or whatever it may be. Everyone else is wrong, lost, or even doomed.
That's such a powerful tactic because it taps into our deep-seated need for certainty and belonging,
Right.
especially in a world that often feels chaotic and confusing.
Right.
The promise of having all the answers can be incredibly alluring.
Yes.
But it also creates this dangerous dynamic where critical thinking goes out the window.
It's like saying, we have the only map to this hidden treasure, and if you don't follow us, you'll be lost forever.
Exactly.
It preys on people's fears and anxieties, making them dependent on the group for their understanding of the world.
Exactly. Now imagine a group that couples those exclusive truth claims with another one of the warning signs, financial manipulation. That's when things get really tricky. We're not just talking about standard membership fees or donations here.
Yeah.
But a relentless pressure to contribute more and more,
Right.
often with promises of spiritual favors or karmic rewards.
You see this a lot, right? It's like the more you give, the faster you'll progress.
Yes.
Or your generosity will guarantee a favorable rebirth.
Exactly.
It's using spiritual language to justify financial exploitation, preying on people's vulnerabilities and their desire to do good.
It's a classic tactic. They might even create a sense of urgency or scarcity,
Right.
claiming that only a limited number of people can access these special blessings or that time is running out to secure your karmic future.
Yeah.
This can lead people to make really irrational decisions, draining their savings, going into debt, even jeopardizing their financial security.
Wow.
All in the name of spiritual advancement.
It's heartbreaking to see how these tactics can manipulate people who are genuinely seeking meaning and purpose in their lives.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets even darker.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the third warning sign, threats for leaving.
Okay.
Have you ever heard stories of people being told they'll be cursed, lose their souls, or face some horrible fate if they dare to leave a particular group?
Unfortunately, those stories are all too common.
Right.
Cults often use fear as a way to keep members in line.
Yeah.
They might claim that leaving will result in spiritual ruin, eternal damnation.
Wow.
Or even physical harm.
Russia.
These threats can be incredibly effective because they tap into our primal fear of being ostracized or punished for going against the grain.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like they create this invisible fence,
yeah.
keeping people trapped in a cycle of fear and obedience.
Right.
But, there's another layer to this that we need to explore. The article also mentions a fascinating study by researchers John Jalalich and Michael D. Langone. They came up with 14 characteristics of cultic groups.
Okay.
Observed from an outside perspective.
Interesting.
It's like having this checklist to help you spot those red flags from a distance.
That's really helpful because sometimes it's hard to see the bigger picture when you're caught up in the day-to-day of a group.
Exactly.
So let's dive into some of those external characteristics. Which ones do you think are most relevant in today's world?
Well, one that stands out to me is this idea of excessive devotion to the leader.
Okay.
Goes beyond just respect or admiration.
Right.
It's this intense veneration.
Right.
Where the leader's words are seen as absolute truth, beyond questioning or criticism.
We see this all the time, right? Not just in religious groups, but in politics, business, even online communities.
Everywhere.
Think about those charismatic figures who build a cult of personality around themselves.
Yeah.
Their followers hang on their every word,
defend
them blindly, and often become emotionally dependent on them.
It's fascinating how this dynamic plays out.
Yeah.
The leader becomes a sort of guru figure.
Right.
And their followers lose their sense of individual agency.
Okay.
They stop questioning, they stop thinking critically.
Yeah.
And become completely reliant on the leader for guidance and validation.
It's like that old saying, don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Right.
It's a reminder to be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers and demands unquestioning loyalty.
Absolutely. And that ties into another characteristic that's really concerning, the suppression of dissent. In cultic groups, any form of disagreement or criticism is met with swift and often harsh consequences.
Right.
People are shamed, ostracized, or even punished for daring to speak up.
It's like they create this culture of fear where everyone is afraid to challenge the status quo, even if they have doubts or concerns.
Yeah.
It becomes this echo chamber
Right.
where the group's ideology gets reinforced over and over again, no matter how extreme or harmful it might be.
And that's what makes it so dangerous.
Yeah.
Without open dialogue and critical thinking,
Right.
groups can easily become insular and detached from reality.
Right.
They develop this us versus them mentality, seeing themselves as the chosen ones, the only ones who possess the truth,
Right.
while everyone else is ignorant or even evil.
You see this so often, right? It's like they draw a line in the sand, creating this division between insiders and outsiders.
Exactly.
Anyone who doesn't conform to their beliefs is labeled an enemy, which can lead to prejudice, discrimination, and even violence.
It's a classic tactic used to solidify group cohesion and justify harmful actions by creating an external threat.
Right.
Whether real or imagined,
Yeah.
they can control their members through fear and paranoia.
It's really scary when you think about it like that.
It is. There are some groups that take this us versus them mentality even further.
Okay.
By exploiting their members for financial gain.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's another one of Jalalich and Langone's characteristics that's sadly all too common.
Yeah.
We're talking about more than just asking for donations.
Right.
It's this relentless pressure to contribute, to give more than you can afford.
Yeah.
Often with the promise of special blessings or spiritual rewards.
It's a form of manipulation that preys on people's vulnerabilities and their desire to do good.
Right.
They might use guilt trips, shame tactics, or even threaten spiritual consequences if members don't comply with their financial demands.
It's truly disturbing. And often this financial exploitation goes hand in hand with another form of control, the control over members' personal lives.
Oh, absolutely.
These groups start dictating everything,
right,
from where people live and what they eat, to who they can associate with, and even what they can believe.
It's a gradual process,
right,
often starting with subtle suggestions and then escalating to strict rules and regulations. Members are pressured to cut ties with family and friends who don't approve of the group.
Oh, wow.
They might be told what to wear, what to read, what to think.
It's like they're slowly chipping away at people's individuality, their sense of self, until they become completely dependent on the group for their identity and their purpose.
It's a classic example of how cults isolate their members and make them more susceptible to manipulation.
Right.
And, you know, it's not always easy to recognize these patterns when you're on the inside.
Yeah.
These groups are often very good at creating a sense of belonging, purpose, and even love.
It's like they're offering this seductive package.
Yes.
A community, a belief system, a sense of certainty in a world that often feels uncertain.
Right.
But the price of admission is your freedom.
Yeah.
Your autonomy.
Yeah.
Your critical thinking.
That's why it's so crucial to be aware of these warning signs.
Right.
You know, the article emphasizes the importance of discernment.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world where we're bombarded with information from all sides.
It's like we need to develop this internal BS detector.
Right.
This ability to question what we're told, to look beyond the surface and examine the motivations behind the message.
It's like we need to ask ourselves, does this information empower me or control me?
Right.
Does it encourage me to think for myself, or does it demand blind obedience?
It's about trusting your gut, too.
Yes.
If something feels off, if a group or a leader is making you uncomfortable, don't ignore those red flags.
Yeah.
It's better to be cautious than to get caught up in something that could be harmful.
I think that's such an important point.
Yeah.
We often downplay our intuition.
Right.
But it can be incredibly powerful.
Yes.
If a situation or a person feels manipulative, there's probably a reason for that.
So let's bring it all back to you. You came to this deep dive wanting to understand what makes a cult.
Right.
How to differentiate it from other groups, and how to spot those red flags. Hopefully, you're starting to see those patterns more clearly now.
We've talked about the role of fear. The 6 warning signs outlined in the Air of Flight article.
Yeah.
And those external characteristics identified by Lalich and Langone.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But you're now equipped with a framework for evaluating groups and leaders.
Yeah.
You can look for those signs of excessive control manipulation and exploitation.
And remember, this isn't just about avoiding extreme situations like cults.
Right.
It's about recognizing those subtle forms of control that can pop up anywhere, in relationships, workplaces, even online communities.
Think about it this way. Have you ever felt pressured to conform to a certain way of thinking?
Okay.
Even if it didn't feel right to you?
Have you ever felt like your voice wasn't being heard, your opinions dismissed, or your boundaries ignored?
Those are the kinds of red flags we need to be aware of.
Right.
Not just in extreme cases, but in everyday life.
Exactly.
It's about being discerning, asking questions, and trusting your instincts.
And if something feels off, don't be afraid to step back, do your research, and talk to people you trust. You have the right to set boundaries and protect your well-being.
This has been a deep dive into some pretty intense territory.
Yeah, it has.
But I hope it's left you feeling more informed and empowered.
I think so.
You now have the tools to identify those red flags.
Right.
To navigate a world that can sometimes feel full of manipulation and misinformation.
Absolutely.
Remember, critical thinking is your superpower.
Love it.
Trust yourself, keep asking questions, and never stop learning. That's how you stay free.
Yeah.
It's like we need to ask ourselves, does this information empower me or control me?
Ooh, I like that.
Does it encourage me to think for myself, or does it demand blind obedience?
Yeah, those are good questions to ask.
Right.
It's about trusting your gut, too. If something feels off, if a group or a leader is making you uncomfortable,
right,
don't ignore those red flags.
Absolutely.
It's better to be cautious than to get caught up in something that could be harmful.
I think that's such an important point. Yeah.
We often downplay our intuition.
Yeah, we do.
But it can be incredibly powerful.
Right.
If a situation or a person feels manipulative, there's probably a reason for that.
So let's bring it all back to you.
Okay.
You came to this deep dive wanting to understand what makes a cult.
Right.
How to differentiate it from other groups, and how to spot those red flags.
Exactly.
Hopefully you're starting to see those patterns more clearly now.
We've talked about the role of fear, the 6 warning signs outlined in that Air of Flight article.
Yes.
And those external characteristics identified by Lalich and Langone.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But you're now equipped with a framework for evaluating groups and leaders.
Right.
You can look for those signs of excessive control, manipulation, and exploitation.
And remember, this isn't just about avoiding extreme situations like cults.
Right.
It's about recognizing those subtle forms of control that can pop up anywhere, in relationships, workplaces, even online communities. Exactly.
Think about it this way. Have you ever felt pressured to conform to a certain way of thinking.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't feel right to you.
It happens all the time.
Have you ever felt like your voice wasn't being heard, your opinions dismissed, or your boundaries ignored?
Those are the kinds of red flags that we need to be aware of.
Right.
Not just in extreme cases, but in everyday life.
Absolutely.
It's about being discerning, asking questions, and trusting your instincts.
If something feels off, don't be afraid to step back, do your research, talk to people you trust. You have the right to set boundaries and protect your well-being.
I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today.
I agree.
Yeah.
This has been a deep dive into some pretty intense territory.
It has.
But I hope it's left you feeling more informed and empowered.
Me too.
You now have the tools to identify those red flags, to navigate a world that can sometimes feel full of manipulation and misinformation.
Absolutely.
I hope this deep dive has been helpful.
Me too.